Hello all. Today in this lecture we are going to learn about the valuation of equity when variable growth in dividend is there. Till now we have learned that when the valuation of equity is there only with the help of fixed growth in dividend. So let's move ahead. So before starting the today's lecture, let's recap whatever we have done till now. Till now we have learned that whenever we are going to value the shares, the valuation of shares is depending on two parts. Whether it can be valued with the help of dividend or it can be valued with the help of earnings. So we are doing when the valuation is done with the help of dividends. So when we move further for the valuation of shares with the help of dividends, it's divided into two parts, when there is a constant dividend and when there is a growth in dividend. We have learned that when the constant dividend is there, there is a constant dividend throughout the life of the shares. For example, suppose in the first year you are getting the $10 as a dividend. So in the next year also you are going to get $10, or in the third year also you are going to get the $10 as a dividend, and so on. That means throughout the life of the shares, or you can say throughout the life of these stocks, you are going to get the same dividend. So dividend is neither increasing nor decreasing. Next comes when there is a growth in dividend. Growth in dividend means that in the first year the dividend is 10, then it's 11, then 12 or 13 or 16 or 19. That means every year the dividend is increasing. So we can say there is a growth in dividend. Now the question arises, how can we find that what is the percentage of growth? So that's why we have divided the complete growth in dividend in two parts. One is constant growth in dividend and one is variable growth in dividend. So let's first of all recap what is constant growth, and then we are going to learn what is the variable growth in dividend. So first of all, let's go with the constant growth and then we are going to cover the variable growth in dividend. So let's talk about the constant growth in dividend. Now, if we are going to talk about constant growth in dividend, so over here the word constant means that the percentage change is constant. That means suppose we are taking the example, in the first year you are getting a amount as a dividend, and let's say my growth percentage, whenever in the next year my dividend is increasing and my growth percentage is fixed to be 10%. That means every year the dividend will increase by 10%. So over here the percentage change is constant. Now if I am getting a dividend in the first year, in the second year I am going to get the a plus 10% of a. So if I am going to calculate the 10% of a, it will be a bracket 1 plus 0.10, which is coming out to be 1.1a. So that means in the second year I am going to get 1.1a. In the first year I am getting 1a. In the second year I am going to get 1.1a. Now if we talk about the third year, so whatever I have got in the second year, it will be increased by 10%. So 1.1a multiplied by 1 plus 0.10, which comes out to be 1.21. Next, in the fourth year, whatever we are getting in the third year, it will increase by 10%. That means 1.21 plus 10% of 1.21. So if we are going to calculate it, it's coming out to be 1.331. In the fifth year, whatever we got in the fourth year plus 10% extra. So in the fifth year, we are going to get 1.4641. In the sixth year, whatever we got in the fifth year plus 10% extra. So our amount will be 1.610. In the seventh year, whatever we got in sixth year plus 10% extra. That means in the seventh year, I am going to get 1.771 and so on. So that means every year, if you will see over here, every year your dividend is increased by 10%. Every year it's increasing by 10%. So that means when the percentage change is constant, we name it as constant growth in dividend. And we have also learned that whenever the constant growth in dividend, we can apply the formula. The formula is P0 equals to D1 upon KE minus G, where P0 represents the current market price of the share and D1 represents the dividend paid at the end of year 1. Or we can say D1 is whatever dividend is declared at the current period. So whatever dividend is declared in current period, it will be paid at the end of year 1. Now whenever you are calculating the constant growth in dividend, or that means whenever with the help of constant growth in dividend, we are going to calculate this value of the share. That means if I am going to calculate what is the current value of the share, my D1 should be there. Normally what the students do, they calculate D0. You have to see, if I am calculating the present value, that means P0, it should be D1. If you are calculating P1, it should be D2. If you are calculating P3, this should be D4. So whatever year present value you are calculating, dividend should be paid in the next year. KE is cost of equity and G is growth rate. And you have to remember, growth rate will always be in decimals. Or what I can do, I can cross multiply it and I can write this formula like this. KE is equals to D1 upon P0 plus G, where P0 will be your current value of equity share, D0 will be current dividend paid, D1 will be dividend paid at the end of year 1, KE is required rate of return and G is constant growth rate. Now suppose in the question D1 is not given. So how to calculate it? D1, what we have learned in the previous slide, we have learned that next year dividend is calculated by current year dividend plus current year dividend multiplied by 1 plus growth rate. So we can calculate D1 as D0 bracket 1 plus G. If you have to calculate D2, so D2 will be calculated as D2 will be equals to D1, whatever is a previous year dividend, D1 and bracket 1 plus G. So that means in this way you can calculate the dividend for the next year. Now let's learn the variable growth in dividend. Now over here, since the word variable means when the percentage change in dividend is changing, it's not constant throughout. That means if in the first year it's 10% growth, in the next year it can be 10% or it can be 11, it can be 12, it can be 13%. Or maybe it can happen that maybe in 1 or 2 years dividend is 10%, in the third year the dividend is increasing, maybe to 12%, maybe to 14%. That means your dividend is not constant throughout, it's changing after a small interval of time. Interval can be for a year, interval can be for 2 years, interval can be for 3 years or 4 years. But it's not constant throughout. So over here in this example, let's say in the year 1, your dividend is A. Amount that the company is paying is A. Now in the next year, let's say growth rate is 10%. So in the second year, you will get 1.1A. Now in the third year, growth rate can be constant or growth rate can change. Now suppose in the next year, growth rate is 11%. So whatever you are getting in the previous year, 1.1 multiply by 1 plus 0.1. So your next year, your dividend will be 1.221. Now in the fourth year, your dividend growth rate can be 11% or it can be 12, it can be 15. So it can remain constant also, it can change also. Now let's say in our example, our dividend is increasing. That means in the next year, my growth rate is 12%. So whatever I am getting in the previous year, multiply by 1 plus 0.12. So my amount is 1.367. Similarly, in the fifth year, let's say my dividend growth rate is again 11%. Now over here we are saying the growth rate is there. Now you have to remember growth rate can be positive, growth rate can be negative. So that means here it's not compulsory that every year if it is we are getting 12%, in the next year I am going to get 13%, 14%. Maybe my dividend amount is increasing, but maybe the growth rate can decrease. So my growth rate over here is 11%. So amount will be 1.517. In the next year, the growth rate is 13%. So your amount will be 1.715. In the 7th year, your growth rate is 14%. So your amount is 1.955. Now you will observe that growth rate, this G is changing. In the first year, that means after getting the first dividend, in the next year you are increased by 10%, then 11%, then 12%, and then it's increased by 11, then 13, then 14. That means this percentage growth is there in dividend. But by what percentage they are increasing, that is changing. It can also happen, suppose in the first year you are getting 10% growth, in the third year also you are getting 10%. Or maybe in the fourth year you are getting 10%, but in the fifth year your growth rate is changing. That means percentage by which the dividend is increasing is changing. It can be 11%. Whenever we are talking about constant growth rate, it means throughout the life of the share, the dividend is constant. It's not changing. That means the constant is for infinity. It's not for a shorter duration of time. Now let's understand with the help of an example. Now here it says the ABC Limited pays a dividend of rupees 1.45 now. That means over here it's talking about the current time period. That means D0. It says pays. So that means right now company is paying a dividend of 1.45. So I can say this 1.45 is D0 because we have already learned 0 means current time period. So 1.45 means D0. Further it is saying that it also declares that the dividend will grow at a rate of 15 for next 4 years. That means the dividend is constant for next 4 years and the rate is 15%. And after 4 years, the constant growth rate is 6% into the future. That means over here it's saying that after 4 years, the dividend will grow by 6% throughout the life of the share. The required rate on equity is 11%. That means KE is 11%. Now what we have to do, we have to find the value of the share. That means over here it's saying that you have to calculate P0. I have to calculate whatever is the current market price that is prevailing in a stock market. So I have to calculate P0. Now let's see how we are going to calculate it. Now first of all, let me calculate the first year dividend. Over here it's given to be D0 and we have already learned that if we have to calculate the first year dividend, the dividend is increasing by 15% for first 4 years. So whatever dividend I am getting in the D0 time period, in the next year I'll be getting 15% extra. So if I am going to calculate 1.45 bracket 1 plus 0.15, so your amount will be 1.67. That means in the first year my dividend will be 1.67. In the second year also dividend is increasing by 15%. So whatever amount you are getting 1.67 multiply by 1 plus 0.15. So your amount will be 1.92. You can see over here your amount is 1.92. In the third year also your dividend growth rate is 15%. So in the third year your amount is 2.21. In the fourth year dividend is 2.21 bracket 1 plus 0.15. So your amount is coming to be 2.54. Now after 4 years, they are saying that there is a constant growth in dividend, that is growth rate is 6% now. So now in the fifth year, dividend will be whatever you are getting in the fourth year plus 6% extra. So it's coming out to be 2.69, and after that your dividend will remain constant. That means growth rate will remain constant. Every year you are going to get the growth of 6% only. So in the sixth year your value will be whatever you have got in fifth year plus 6% extra. So your amount will be 2.85. and throughout the life of the share, that means whenever the shares are there, you are going to get 6% growth in dividend every year only. So let's see how to solve it. Now first of all, we are going to calculate P4. Now the question arises, why we are calculating P4? Now if you are going to see over here, till the year 4, that means till this point, your dividend is changing. Beyond this point, the dividend remains constant, because the question is saying 15% for next 4 years and then at the constant growth. That means after 4 years, dividend is not changing. Till 4 years, the dividend is changing. And after 4th year, that means starting from the starting of 5th year till the life of the share, the dividend rate is constant. So the first thing that you have to remember, the year beyond which your dividend rate is constant, we have to calculate the price of the share at that particular point. So in this question, beyond 4th year, dividend rate is constant. So that's why we are going to calculate P4. Now we have learned the formula P0 is equals to D1 upon KE minus G. As we have already discussed that for whatever year we are calculating the price, dividend should be for the next year. So that's why over here I am calculating P4. So it should be D5 divided by KE minus G. D5 we have already calculated in the previous slide. D5 is your 2.69. D5 will be 2.69. KE is already given 0.11, that means 11%. And growth rate is given to be 6%. If I am going to solve this, the amount is coming to be 53.8. That means value of the equity share at the end of 4th year will be rupees 53.8. Now, see this number line. We have already calculated D1. So that means this amount will be your D1. This amount 1.92 we have already calculated to be D2. 2.21 we have calculated to be D3. 2.54 we have calculated to be D4. 2.69 is D5 and 2.85 is D6. And we have also calculated P4. Now we have calculated P4 to be 53.8. Now if you are going to see, P4 is coming out at the end of 4th year. So that means once we have calculated P4 at the end of 4th year, beyond that point, we don't have to consider the values. That means what all values I am going to consider to calculate P0 is the value of D1. That means I will consider this value, I will consider this value, I will consider this value, I'll consider D4 and I will consider P4. Now what we have learned, if I have to calculate this P0, I have to calculate this P0, that means current value of this share. So now I have 5 values. Next step is to convert these 5 values into the present value. That means now I am going to convert this D1 to P0, D2 to P0, D3 to P0, D4 to P0 and this P4 to P0. So that means now I am having these 5 values. I have to consider these 5 values to P0. And I don't have to consider this value and I don't have to consider this value because I have converted all these values to P4. Now let's see how to solve it. Now we have learned that D1 is 1.67. If you are going to see the previous slide, in D1 is 1.61, D2 is 1.92, 2.21, 2.54 and this 53.8. So the same thing I have written over here. Your D1 is 1.67, D2 is 1.92, D3 is 2.21, D4 is 2.54 and P4 is 53.8. And in the question it's given that present value factor we have to KE is 11%. So let's calculate the present value factor at 11%. Now since we know that the KE is 11%, so what is our next step? We have to calculate the present value factor at 11%. Let's see how we are going to calculate the present value factors. Now if we are going to calculate the present value factors, it will be 100 divided by 111. So at the end of first year, your present value factor at 11% will be 9009. I have rounded off, so it will be 901. In the next year, you have to just press multiply sign and then equals to. In the next year, it will be 811. You can see it's 811. Next year, it will be 731. It's 731. Now at the end of fourth year, the value will be 0.658. Now D4 is also at the end of fourth year, and P4, that means present value of the equity share at the end of fourth year, will be P4. At the end of fourth year is 53.8. So in these 2 years, because these two values represent at the end of fourth year, so we have to take the present value factor at 0.658 only. So in both the cases, the present value factor will be 0.658. Now what we have to do, we have to multiply this amount with the present value factor. Now if we are going to multiply it, we are going to get 1.67 multiplied by 0.901, it will be 1.504. Similarly, you have to multiply these two parts, that means amount and the present value factor. You will get these values, and after that you have to add all these values. Once you are going to add all these values, your value will be 41.74902. So I can say the present value of equity, that means P0, is rupees 41.74902. That means this particular share value is rupees 41.74 in the stock market. Now there is a question for you. You have to do this question. The question says that the ABC Limited pays a dividend of rupees 2.07 now. That means this is D0 which is given to you. It also declares a dividend that which grow at the rate of 14% for next 5 years. And after that the growth rate is changing. So that means I can say that it's a variable growth rate. But beyond 5 years it becomes constant and it is 7%. Your KE is 14% and you have to calculate the present value of this share. Hope you have understood the concept of variable growth in dividend. For further reference, you can refer my book, Financial Management. Thank you.